Good evening, dear listeners, and welcome to another cozy journey into the past. Tonight, we're diving into a peculiar chapter of history, the great beard boom of the 19th century, when men across Europe and beyond decided razors were their sworn enemies. Picture a world where beards weren't just facial hair, they were statements, status symbols, and sometimes a place to lose your comb. This is a story of whiskers, wisdom, and the occasional nap in a barber's chair. So, settle into your favorite blanket, dim the lights, and let's drift back to a time when every chin was a canvas for glorious bushy masterpieces. Close your eyes if you'd like, and let the soft rhythm of this tale carry you into a world of Victorian grooming and gentle absurdity. Ready? Let's begin. Imagine yourself in a bustling 19th century city, London perhaps, or Paris. It's 1855 and the streets are alive with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages, the rustle of crinoline skirts, and the unmistakable sight of men sporting beards so magnificent they could double as bird nests. This wasn't just a fashion trend, it was a cultural revolution. For centuries, men had shaved their faces smooth, bowing to the clean-cut ideals of the Renaissance or the powdered wigs of the 1700s. But by the mid-1800s, something shifted. Beards sprouted like wildflowers from the chins of poets to the jaws of emperors. Why? What made men abandon their razors and embrace a forest of facial hair? Tonight we'll wander through this hairy history, exploring the social, cultural, and even scientific reasons behind the beard boom. We'll meet quirky characters like the Austrian emperor who spent hours grooming his whiskers, and uncover bizarre trends like beard competitions that rivaled modern reality shows. With each chapter, we'll sink deeper into the cozy, absurd world of Victorian grooming, where barbers were artists and beards were badges of honor. So let's step into the barber's shop, where the air smells of lavender oil and the chairs are perfect for a quiet doze. Here's the story of the Great Beard Boom in 7 parts. Part 1. The dawn of the beard boom. Let's begin in the early 1800s, a time when the world was changing faster than a barber could sharpen his blade. Europe was emerging from the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars, which had left nations weary and eager for new expressions of identity. Industrialization was transforming cities. Smokestacks rose in London, Manchester, and Berlin, while steamships churned across the Atlantic. Amid this upheaval, men began to rethink their faces, turning away from the smooth chins that had defined centuries of Western fashion. For generations, a clean-shaven face had been the hallmark of refinement, a legacy of Renaissance courts where figures like Louis XIV of France set the standard with their polished, hairless visages. In the early 1800s, a shaved face still signaled discipline, order, and conformity to the ideals of a society that prized structure. But by the 1830s, a quiet rebellion was stirring, not with swords or cannons, but with whiskers. The beard boom didn't erupt suddenly. It began as a whisper, a subtle shift in the cultural winds, like a seed taking root in a forgotten garden. In England, the Romantic movement was at its peak, with poets like Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, and William Wordsworth celebrating nature, emotion, and the untamed spirit. A shaved face, they argued, was a product of artificial restraint, a symbol of a society obsessed with control. A beard, by contrast, was a return to something raw, authentic, and gloriously wild. Byron, with his brooding charisma, was rumoured to have let his stubble grow during his travels in Greece, inspiring young intellectuals in London's coffee houses to follow suit. By 1840, these bohemian types, artists, writers, and philosophers, were letting their facial hair flourish, much to the dismay of their clean-shaven fathers, who saw beards as a sign of rebellion, or, worse, laziness. Soldiers played an unexpected role in this hairy revolution. During the Crimean War of the 1850s, British troops faced brutal conditions in the trenches of Sevastopol. The bitter cold, scarce water, and rusted razors made shaving a luxury few could afford. Beards became a practical necessity, shielding faces from frostbite and wind. When these soldiers returned home, their bushy whiskers were celebrated as emblems of bravery. Newspapers printed portraits of bearded heroes, and soon civilians began to emulate them. A beard wasn't just hair, it was a badge of courage, a testament to survival. Fashionable gentlemen in London's West End and Paris's boulevards took note, and barbers, once busy with daily shaves, found their chairs emptying. This shift wasn't without resistance. In 1843, the Times of London published a scathing editorial titled The Beard Menace, warning that facial hair was a filthy affectation that could harbour vermin and disease. The writer, a staunch advocate of clean-shaven respectability, argued that beards were a step backward to a barbaric past. Similar sentiments echoed in Paris, where a conservative pamphlet called Beards, a revolt against civilized grooming. Yet these critics were swimming against the tide. By the 1850s, beards were everywhere, from the elegant drawing rooms of Mayfair to the gritty factories of Manchester. Even Queen Victoria's court, a bastion of tradition, saw courtiers sporting whiskers that could rival a lion's mane, their faces framed by curls of hair that swayed as they bowed to the Queen. One of the era's most iconic bearded figures was Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria, whose sideburns, known as mutton chops, became a symbol of imperial grandeur. Franz Joseph's grooming routine was a daily ritual, a slow and deliberate process that began at dawn. His barber, a Viennese craftsman named Hans Gruber, used a bespoke blend of lavender and rosemary oil to keep the emperor's whiskers glossy. The process involved steaming towels, gentle combing, and precise trimming, all conducted in a velvet-lined chamber lit by flickering candles. Imagine Franz Joseph seated in a plush chair, the scent of lavender filling the air, the soft snip of scissors blending with the ticking of a grandfather clock. It was a moment of calm in a busy imperial life, a pause that set the tone for the day. Beards became a canvas for creativity, a way for men to express their individuality. Across Europe, men sculpted their facial hair into fantastical shapes, curling moustaches that twisted like vines, forked beards that split like rivers, or sideburns that swept down to the chest like curtains. In 1856, a London barber named Thomas Gillette, no relation to the later razor company, published a pamphlet titled The Art of the Beard, a 50-page guide to whisker styling. It included detailed diagrams for designs like the Imperial Cascade, a flowing beard that mimicked a waterfall, and the Philosopher's Tuft, a compact scholarly beard favoured by academics. Gillette's shop on Fleet Street became a pilgrimage site for dandies, who reclined in his leather chairs, sipping tea and debating the merits of various beard shapes. The atmosphere was leisurely, almost meditative, with the hum of conversation mingling with the scent of pomade and the occasional yawn of a dozing customer. The beard boom was more than a fashion statement. It was tied to deeper cultural currents. The 19th century was an age of exploration, with adventurers like David Livingstone and Richard Burton venturing into Africa and Asia. A beard became a symbol of rugged masculinity, a nod to these explorers who braved uncharted lands. In London's gentlemen's clubs, men swapped stories of polar expeditions and jungle treks, their beards lending an air of authenticity to their tales. At the same time, pseudoscience was flourishing, and some doctors claimed beards had health benefits. Dr. Alphonse Moreau, a French physician, wrote in 1854 that facial hair could filter the air, protecting against throat infections. He even suggested that a well-grown beard could soothe the nerves and promote restful sleep, a claim that resonated with an era obsessed with wellness. Though his science was shaky, Moreau's ideas added to the beard's allure, making it a symbol of both vitality and tranquility. The rise of the beard also reflected a broader shift toward individuality. In an age of mass production, where factories churned out identical goods, a beard was a way to stand out. Men took pride in their unique whisker styles, comparing them to works of art. In Paris, a group of artists formed the Whisker Society, hosting salons where they sketched each other's beards by candlelight. These gatherings, filled with laughter and the clink of wine glasses, were as much about camaraderie as creativity. Meanwhile, in rural England, farmers grew beards to distinguish themselves from city dandies, their whiskers often tangled with bits of hay or dust, a badge of their honest labour. The beard boom wasn't universal, though. In some circles, it was seen as a passing fad, a youthful rebellion that would soon fade. Older generations, particularly those in conservative professions like law or clergy, clung to their razors, viewing beards as unprofessional. In 1852, a Cambridge professor was reprimanded for lecturing with a dishevelled beard, prompting a heated debate in the university's common room. Yet even these holdouts couldn't deny the trend's momentum. By the late 1850s, beards had become a fixture of public life, appearing in portraits, advertisements, and even political cartoons, where they were used to poke fun at pompous politicians. As we drift through this first chapter, picture a Victorian gentleman, his beard freshly oiled, settling into a plush armchair by a fireplace. The world outside is noisy, with the clatter of industry and the bustle of commerce, but here, in the glow of candlelight, all is calm. The beard boom was more than a trend. It was a movement, a celebration of individuality in an increasingly standardized world. Let's linger here a moment, in the quiet of the barber's shop, where the air is warm and the chairs are soft, before we move on to the next chapter of our story. Part 2. The social status of beards. By the 1850s, a beard was no longer just hair. It was a social statement, a way to navigate the rigid hierarchies of Victorian society. In an era where every detail of dress, from the tilt of a top hat to the polish of a cane, signaled status, facial hair emerged as a powerful new marker. A well-groomed beard could transform a man from a humble clerk to a gentleman of distinction, while a neglected one might brand him as an eccentric, or worse, a vagrant. Let's step into the opulent drawing rooms and smoky gentlemen's clubs of the era, where beards were debated with the same intensity as politics, literature, or the latest railway expansion. In London, the epicenter of the British Empire, beards were a topic of endless fascination. The Reform Club, a haven for liberal intellectuals, became a showcase for the trend. By 1857, a visitor remarked that one could scarcely see a chin for all the whiskers, as members sported beards of every shape and size. These weren't mere patches of hair, they were meticulously crafted, often requiring hours of grooming each week. Barbers became the unsung heroes of the era, their shops transformed into temples of style. A skilled barber, like James Wilkinson of Bond Street, could command fees rivaling those of a doctor. Wilkinson's shop, with its mahogany paneling and crystal decanters of bay rum, had a waiting list stretching weeks, and his clients included politicians, poets, and even a minor duke who insisted on having his beard trimmed under moonlight for aesthetic harmony. The social hierarchy of beards was intricate, almost like a language of its own. A full, bushy beard, cascading over the collar, was the mark of a philosopher or artist, suggesting a mind too lofty for mundane concerns like shaving. Thinkers like John Ruskin, the art critic, wore such beards, their whiskers a testament to their intellectual gravitas. A neatly trimmed beard, clipped close to the jaw, was preferred by bankers and lawyers, signaling respectability with a nod to modernity. Moustaches, however, were a gamble, too flamboyant, and you risked being labelled a dandy, a term that carried a whiff of ridicule. Too thin, and you might be mistaken for a villain in a penny dreadful. Sideburns, like those of Emperor Franz Joseph, struck a balance, versatile enough for both aristocrats and shopkeepers. Known as mutton chops, they framed the face like curtains, adding an air of authority without overwhelming the wearer's features. Women played a significant role in shaping the beard's social status. In 1859, the Ladies' Companion published a lively debate titled "The Beard, Friend or Foe?", which captured the divided opinions of the time. Some women found a well-groomed beard irresistible, comparing it to a lion's mane or a knight's armor. At balls, debutantes whispered about the rugged charm of bearded suitors, whose whiskers gleamed under chandeliers. Others were less impressed, complaining that beards scratched during waltzes or collected crumbs at dinner parties. One anonymous letter to the editor described a suitor whose beard was so voluminous it obscured his entire personality, leaving only hair to court. Yet for many, a beard signaled stability, a sign that the wearer was a man of substance, rooted in tradition, yet bold enough to defy convention. The beard boom fueled a thriving industry of grooming products, turning barbershops into bustling marketplaces. Pomades, oils, and waxes flooded the shelves, each promising to transform a scruffy beard into a work of art. Dr. Whisker's Beard Balm, a popular brand, boasted secret essences from the Orient to promote growth and luster. Its advertisements, featuring a dreamy-eyed gentleman gazing into a mirror, were plastered across London's omnibuses. Other products included rose-scented oils, clove-flavored waxes, and even a beard elixir that claimed to invigorate the follicles. Barbershops became social hubs where men lingered for hours, swapping stories of politics, cricket, or the latest scandal. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost hypnotic, with the rhythm of brushing and snipping punctuated by the occasional snore of a dozing customer. Class, as always in Victorian society, shaped the beard's role. Wealthy men could afford the time, tools, and barbers to maintain their whiskers, turning grooming into a luxurious ritual. A gentleman might spend an hour each morning with his valet, who applied oils with the precision of a painter. The working class, however, faced challenges. A labourer's beard, matted with coal dust or flour, was seen as a sign of toil, not taste. Many made do with a single blunt razor passed down through generations, or visited cheap barbershops where the service was quick and the towels threadbare. This divide inspired some amusing innovations. In 1860, a Manchester inventor named Samuel Hodge patented a self-trimming beard comb, a contraption with tiny blades that promised to keep whiskers neat without a barber's help. It was a spectacular failure, often tangling beards into knots, but its advertisements, showing a man combing his beard while napping by a fire, became a minor sensation. Beards also became a topic of etiquette, with guidebooks offering advice on proper whisker decorum. The Gentleman's Manual of 1855 advised men to avoid stroking one's beard in polite company, lest it appear vain, and to ensure no food lingers in the whiskers, as this offends the delicate. Such rules were taken seriously, particularly at formal dinners, where a stray crumb could ruin a man's reputation. In one famous incident, a diplomat at a Buckingham Palace banquet was mortified when a piece of asparagus was found nestled in his beard, prompting a flurry of apologetic letters to the hostess. These stories, whispered in drawing rooms, added to the beard's mystique, blending humour with the era's obsession with propriety. The social significance of beards extended to the workplace. In banks and law offices, a well-groomed beard could signal reliability, while an unkempt one might raise all eyebrows. In 1858, a London bank clerk was dismissed for refusing to trim his wild and woolly beard, which his manager deemed unfit for commerce. The clerk, a poet in his spare time, wrote a scathing sonnet about the incident, published in a local paper, which only fueled the beard's rebellious allure. Meanwhile, in the arts, beards were practically a requirement. Painters, musicians, and writers wore them as badges of creativity, their whiskers a canvas for their unconventional ideas. As we settle into this chapter, imagine a gentleman's club, its walls lined with oak, its air thick with cigar smoke and the scent of bay rum. Men recline in armchairs, their beards catching the firelight, their voices low and unhurried. The beard was more than fashion, it was a social contract, a way to navigate the complexities of Victorian life, from the drawing room to the factory floor. Let's rest here, in the warmth of the club, where the world feels distant and the air is filled with the quiet hum of conversation, before we continue our journey. Part 2. The social status of beards. By the 1850s, a beard was no longer just hair. It was a social statement, a way to navigate the rigid hierarchies of Victorian society. In an era where every detail of dress, from the tilt of a top hat to the polish of a cane, signaled status, facial hair emerged as a powerful new marker. A well-groomed beard could transform a man from a humble clerk to a gentleman of distinction, while a neglected one might brand him as an eccentric, or, worse, a vagrant. Let's step into the opulent drawing rooms and smoky gentlemen's clubs of the era, where beards were debated with the same intensity as politics, literature, or the latest railway expansion. In London, the epicenter of the British Empire, beards were a topic of endless fascination. The Reform Club, a haven for liberal intellectuals, became a showcase for the trend. By 1857, a visitor remarked that one could scarcely see a chin for all the whiskers, as members sported beards of every shape and size. These weren't mere patches of hair. They were meticulously crafted, often requiring hours of grooming each week. Barbers became the unsung heroes of the era, their shops transformed into temples of style. A skilled barber like James Wilkinson of Bond Street could command fees rivaling those of a doctor. Wilkinson's shop, with its mahogany paneling and crystal decanters of bay rum, had a waiting list stretching weeks, and his clients included politicians, poets, and even a minor duke who insisted on having his beard trimmed under moonlight for aesthetic harmony. The social hierarchy of beards was intricate, almost like a language of its own. A full, bushy beard, cascading over the collar, was the mark of a philosopher or artist, suggesting a mind too lofty for mundane concerns like shaving. Thinkers, like John Ruskin, the art critic, wore such beards, their whiskers a testament to their intellectual gravitas. A neatly trimmed beard, clipped close to the jaw, was preferred by bankers and lawyers, signaling respectability with a nod to modernity. Moustaches, however, were a gamble, too flamboyant, and you risked being labelled a dandy, a term that carried a whiff of ridicule. Too thin, and you might be mistaken for a villain in a penny dreadful. Sideburns, like those of Emperor Franz Joseph, struck a balance, versatile enough for both aristocrats and shopkeepers. Known as mutton chops, they framed the face like curtains, adding an air of authority without overwhelming the wearer's features. Women played a significant role in shaping the beard's social status. In 1859, the Ladies' Companion published a lively debate titled "The Beard, Friend or Foe," which captured the divided opinions of the time. Some women found a well-groomed beard irresistible, comparing it to a lion's mane or a knight's armor. At balls, debutantes whispered about the rugged charm of bearded suitors, whose whiskers gleamed under chandeliers. Others were less impressed, complaining that beards scratched during waltzes or collected crumbs at dinner parties. One anonymous letter to the editor described a suitor whose beard was so voluminous it obscured his entire personality, leaving only hair to court. Yet, for many, a beard signaled stability, a sign that the wearer was a man of substance. rooted in tradition, yet bold enough to defy convention. The beard boom fueled a thriving industry of grooming products, turning barbershops into bustling marketplaces. Pomades, oils, and waxes flooded the shelves, each promising to transform a scruffy beard into a work of art. Dr. Whisker's Beard Balm, a popular brand, boasted secret essences from the Orient to promote growth and luster. Its advertisements, featuring a dreamy-eyed gentleman gazing into a mirror, were plastered across London's omnibuses. Other products included rose-scented oils, clove-flavoured waxes, and even a beard elixir that claimed to invigorate the follicles. Barbershops became social hubs, where men lingered for hours, swapping stories of politics, cricket, or the latest scandal. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost hypnotic, with the rhythm of brushing and snipping punctuated by the occasional snore of a dozing customer. Class, as always in Victorian society, shaped the beard's role. Wealthy men could afford the time, tools, and barbers to maintain their whiskers, turning grooming into a luxurious ritual. A gentleman might spend an hour each morning with his valet, who applied oils with the precision of a painter. The working class, however, faced challenges. A labourer's beard, matted with coal dust or flour, was seen as a sign of toil, not taste. Many made do with a single blunt razor, passed down through generations, or visited cheap barbershops where the service was quick and the towels threadbare. This divide inspired some amusing innovations. In 1860, a Manchester inventor named Samuel Hodge patented a self-trimming beard comb, a contraption with tiny blades that promised to keep whiskers neat without a barber's help. It was a spectacular failure, often tangling beards into knots, but its advertisements, showing a man combing his beard while napping by a fire, became a minor sensation. Beards also became a topic of etiquette, with guidebooks offering advice on proper whisker decorum. The Gentleman's Manual of 1855 advised men to avoid stroking one's beard in polite company, lest it appear vain, and to ensure no food lingers in the whiskers, as this offends the delicate. Such rules were taken seriously, particularly at formal dinners, where a stray crumb could ruin a man's reputation. In one famous incident, a diplomat at a Buckingham Palace banquet was mortified when a piece of asparagus was found nestled in his beard, prompting a flurry of apologetic letters to the hostess. These stories, whispered in drawing rooms, added to the beard's mystique, blending humour with the era's obsession with propriety. The social significance of beards extended to the workplace. In banks and law offices, a well-groomed beard could signal reliability, while an unkempt one might raise eyebrows. In 1858, a London bank clerk was dismissed for refusing to trim his wild and woolly beard, which his manager deemed unfit for commerce. The clerk, a poet in his spare time, wrote a scathing sonnet about the incident, published in a local paper, which only fueled the beard's rebellious allure. Meanwhile, in the arts, beards were practically a requirement. Painters, musicians, and writers wore them as badges of creativity, their whiskers a canvas for their unconventional ideas. As we settle into this chapter, imagine a gentleman's club, its walls lined with oak, its air thick with cigar smoke and the scent of bay. Men recline in armchairs, their beards catching the firelight, their voices low and unhurried. The beard was more than fashion, it was a social contract, a way to navigate the complexities of Victorian life, from the drawing room to the factory floor. Let's rest here, in the warmth of the club, where the world feels distant and the air is filled with the quiet hum of conversation, before we continue our journey. Part 3. The Science and Pseudoscience of Beards. The 19th century was an age of scientific wonder with breakthroughs like steam engines, telegraphs, and Darwin's theories reshaping the world. But not all science was rigorous. Amid this fervour, beards became a subject of intense and often absurd study, with doctors, philosophers, and charlatans weighing in on their benefits and dangers. Barbershops, once simple places of grooming, became battlegrounds for ideas, where men debated the merits of whiskers over steaming towels and frothy lather. Let's wander into the dusty pages of Victorian science, where beards were hailed as medical marvels, condemned as health hazards, and celebrated as links to the cosmos. One of the most persistent claims was that beards were good for your health. In 1853, Dr. Alphonse Moreau, a French physician with a beard that reached his waist, published a treatise titled The Hygienic Beard. He argued that facial hair acted as a natural filter, trapping dust, pollen, and germs before they could reach the lungs. In an era when tuberculosis and cholera were rampant, this idea resonated deeply. Moreau's followers went further, claiming beards could ward off colds, sore throats, and even melancholy. One doctor, a Dr. Pierre Dubois, suggested that stroking one's beard could calm the nerves and induce a state of repose, a theory that gained traction among stressed London businessmen. Picture a gentleman in his oak-panelled study, half asleep by a fire, twirling his whiskers as the world outside fades away. Not everyone was convinced. In 1861, a British medical journal, The Lancet, published a study by Dr. Henry Pritchard, who claimed beards were breeding grounds for bacteria. Pritchard swabbed the beards of London cab drivers and examined them under a microscope, reporting a menagerie of microscopic creatures lurking in the hair. His findings were inconclusive, but his vivid prose sparked a minor panic. Newspapers ran headlines like "The Hidden Dangers of Whiskers," and barbers reported a brief surge in shaving appointments. Yet the beard boom was too entrenched to be undone by a few germs. Many dismissed Pritchard's study as alarmist, pointing out that a clean beard, washed with soap and water, was no dirtier than a shaved chin. Pseudoscience flourished alongside these debates. Phrenology, the study of skull shapes to determine character, was wildly popular, and some practitioners claimed beards enhanced mental faculties. Dr. Gustavus Cohen, a prominent phrenologist, wrote in 1858 that a robust beard indicates a robust mind, arguing that facial hair stimulated the brain's creative faculties. His lectures, held in dimly lit halls, were so monotonous that they put half the audience to sleep, a fitting tribute to the relaxing power of beard talk. Spiritualists took things further, claiming beards connected men to the cosmic energies of the universe. A London medium, Madame Celeste, held seances where she insisted that bearded men were more likely to commune with spirits, as their whiskers acted as antennas for the ethereal. Her claims were met with skepticism but drew curious crowds who often dozed off during her long-winded rituals. The grooming industry seized on these ideas, marketing products with scientific-sounding names to capitalize on the beard's mystique. Vitalizing Beard Tonic promised to invigorate the follicles, while Cerebral Whisker Elixir claimed to boost intellect. One company, Beardmore and Sons, sold a magnetic beard brush that supposedly stimulated hair growth through electrogalvanic currents. Priced at a staggering 5 guineas, it was a luxury item, and its ineffectiveness didn't deter buyers. The advertisements, showing a gentleman dozing with a radiant beard, were a triumph of marketing over reality. Pharmacies also stocked beard growth serums, often little more than scented olive oil, which promised miraculous results. One such product, Dr. Sampson's Hair Invigorator, was endorsed by a retired admiral who claimed his beard grew An inch overnight, a claim that raised eyebrows but sold bottles. Beards even entered the debate over evolution. After Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859, some enthusiasts argued that beards were a sign of human progress, linking men to their noble, hirsute ancestors. A London naturalist, Professor Edward Huxley, wrote that the beard is nature's crown, a testament to man's primal strength. His rivals countered that shaving was the true mark of civilization, separating man from beast. These debates filled lecture halls where scholars droned on about follicles and phylogeny, their voices lulling audiences into a gentle slumber. In one memorable lecture, a professor's beard became entangled in his notes, prompting laughter and applause from the sleepy crowd. The science of beards also intersected with medicine. Some doctors claimed that beards protected against sunburn, windburn, and even toothaches, as the hair insulated the face. Others argued that beards could exacerbate skin conditions, trapping sweat and dirt. In 1863, a dermatologist named Dr. William Stokes published a pamphlet warning of beard itch, a condition he attributed to poor hygiene. His solution, a daily wash with lavender soap, became a staple in barbershops, where customers savored the soothing ritual of a warm lather. These debates, while often absurd, reflected the era's fascination with health and progress, with beards at the center of the conversation. The pseudoscience of beards extended to unlikely fields. A German chemist, Dr. Friedrich Baum, claimed in 1860 that beards could absorb noxious vapors from industrial cities, acting as a natural air purifier. His experiments, involving bearded volunteers standing in smoky factories, were inconclusive, but his lectures drew crowds eager to believe in the beard's magical properties. Meanwhile, in Paris, a group of astrologers linked beard growth to the phases of the moon, advising men to trim their whiskers under a waxing crescent for optimal luster. These theories, while laughable, added to the beard's allure, making it a symbol of both science and mystery. As we linger in this chapter, picture a Victorian library, its shelves groaning with leather-bound books, its air heavy with the scent of ink and dust. Scholar sits at a desk, his beard spilling over his papers, his eyes heavy with sleep. The science of beards may have been shaky, but its charm was undeniable, a blend of earnest inquiry and whimsical nonsense. Let's pause here, in the quiet of the library, where the world feels far away, and the air is filled with the soft rustle of turning pages, before we move on. Part 4. The Global Spread of the Beard Boom. The beard boom wasn't confined to Europe's cobblestone streets. By the 1860s it had spread across the globe, from the salons of Paris to the bustling bazaars of Istanbul, each culture weaving the trend into its own traditions. Beards became a universal language, a shared expression of style, status, and serenity, adapted to local customs and climates. Let's travel the world, from the icy fjords of Norway to the sunlit markets of Bombay, and explore how the beard boom took root in distant lands, creating a global mosaic of whiskers. In the Ottoman Empire, beards had long been a symbol of wisdom and authority, rooted in Islamic traditions that valued facial hair as a sign of piety. But the 19th century brought a new twist: European influence. Ottoman barbers in Istanbul began offering London cuts, blending traditional Turkish styles with Victorian precision. In the Grand Bazaar, men gathered in tea houses, their beards glistening with rosewater and myrrh, swapping stories of trade and travel. The grooming process was a ritual of patience: clip, brush, oil, conducted in shaded courtyards where the air was thick with the scent of spices. Barbers, often trained in both Ottoman and European techniques, used curved scissors and intricate combs, their movements slow and deliberate, creating a meditative atmosphere that invited relaxation. In America, the beard boom took on a rugged frontier spirit. The Civil War, 1861-1865, was a turning point, as soldiers on both sides grew beards for practicality and camaraderie. In the muddy camps of Virginia, razors were a luxury, and beards became a badge of brotherhood. Abraham Lincoln, elected in 1860, became the first bearded U.S. president, inspired by a letter from 11-year-old Grace Bedell, who suggested whiskers would make him more distinguished. Lincoln's modest beard, neatly trimmed, sparked a national trend. Barbershops in New York and Boston became sanctuaries where men escaped the chaos of war and politics for a few hours of grooming. These shops, with their leather chairs and mirrored walls, were filled with the scent of cedarwood oil and the hum of conversation, often punctuated by the soft snores of a dozing client. In India, the beard boom intersected with colonial and local traditions. British officers in Bombay and Calcutta grew beards to blend in with Indian elites who had long prized facial hair as a mark of status. Indian barbers, known for their skill, developed unique techniques using sandalwood oil and combs carved from neem wood to create beards that shimmered in the tropical sun. In the princely states of Rajasthan, Maharajas hosted lavish beard competitions where contestants vied for titles like Most Majestic Whiskers or Most Resplendent Moustache. These events, held under silk canopies, were as much about relaxation as rivalry. Participants lounged on cushions, sipping spiced tea and listening to the soft strum of a sitar as judges admired their whiskers with exaggerated solemnity. The beard boom reached even the most remote corners of the world. In Australia, gold prospectors in the outback grew wild, untamed beards, claiming they kept dust out of their lungs and protected against sunburn. These rugged whiskers, often tangled with dirt, were a far cry from the polished beards of London, but they carried the same spirit of defiance. In Japan, where beards were traditionally rare, Western visitors introduced the trend, sparking a brief craze for samurai whiskers among the urban elite in Tokyo. Barbers in Yokohama learned European techniques, offering Victorian-style trims to merchants and diplomats who savored the novelty of a bearded appearance. In Russia, beards had deep cultural roots tied to Orthodox Christianity and imperial tradition. Tsar Alexander II, with his full flowing beard, set the standard for Russian nobility. In St. Petersburg, barbershops became gathering places for aristocrats who discussed literature and politics while their whiskers were oiled with bergamot-scented pomade. The grooming process was a ritual of luxury, with barbers using silver combs and steaming towels infused with chamomile. In contrast, Russian peasants grew beards as a matter of tradition, their whiskers often untrimmed but cherished as a sign of resilience. The beard boom thus bridged class divides, uniting czars and serfs in a shared love of facial hair. In South America, the beard boom took hold in cities like Buenos Aires, where European immigrants brought the trend to the vibrant port city. Argentine gauchos, known for their horsemanship, began growing beards to emulate the European gentlemen they saw in cafes. Local barbers adapted, using cocoa butter and citrus oils to keep beards soft in the humid climate. In Brazil, the trend reached the coffee plantations, where landowners sported beards to signal their cosmopolitan taste. These global variations created a rich tapestry of styles, from the sleek, oiled whiskers of Istanbul to the wild, sun-bleached beards of the Australian outback. The global spread of the beard boom was fueled by trade and travel. Steamships carried European fashions to distant ports, while colonial networks spread British and French grooming habits. In Hong Kong, British traders introduced beard oils, which local barbers blended with jasmine and ginseng. In Cairo, French expatriates popularized the Napoleon III beard, a neatly trimmed style inspired by the French emperor. These global variations created a rich tapestry of styles, from the sleek, oiled whiskers of Istanbul to the wild, sun-bleached beards of the Australian outback. The global spread of the beard boom was fueled by trade and travel. Steamships carried European fashions to distant ports, while colonial networks spread British and French grooming habits. In Hong Kong, British traders introduced beard oils, which local barbers blended with jasmine and ginseng. In Cairo, French expatriates popularized the Napoleon III beard, a neatly trimmed style inspired by the French emperor. Each region added its own flavor, creating a global dialogue of whiskers that transcended borders and languages. As we drift through this chapter, imagine a bustling bazaar, its air filled with the scents of spices and oils. A man sits cross-legged, his beard being combed by a skilled barber, his eyes half closed in contentment. The beard boom was a global phenomenon, uniting men across cultures in a shared love of whiskers, each style a reflection of its place and time. Let's rest here, in the warmth of the bazaar, where the world feels connected by the simple act of grooming, before we continue. Part 5. The art and ritual of beard grooming. If the beard boom was a revolution, then barbershops were its headquarters, where men gathered to transform their whiskers into works of art. In the 19th century, these establishments were more than places for a quick trim. They were sanctuaries of style, conversation, and, often, a quiet nap. Let's step into a Victorian barbershop, where the air is thick with the scent of lavender, and the rhythm of grooming is as soothing as a lullaby. A typical barbershop was a sensory delight, a haven from the bustle of the outside world. Picture a small room with polished wooden floors, a crackling fireplace, and shelves lined with bottles of mysterious elixirs, rosewater, bergamot, and clove-infused oils gleaming in the gaslight. The barber, often a charismatic figure with a beard of his own, wielded an arsenal of tools, silver-handled, combs, ivory brushes, and scissors that flashed like jewels. Customers reclined in plush leather chairs, their heads tilted back, their eyes drifting shut as the barber worked his magic. The process was slow and deliberate, a ritual that could last an hour or more, each step designed to soothe both body and mind. Grooming began with a warm towel steamed over a kettle and scented with herbs like chamomile or eucalyptus. The towel, draped over the face, softened the skin and relaxed the muscles, its warmth a gentle invitation to unwind. Next came a lather of soap, whipped into a froth with a badger hairbrush, its bristles gliding across the beard like a painter's stroke. The barber then combed the whiskers, untangling knots with the patience of a gardener tending roses. Oils and pomades followed, applied with gentle circular strokes to add shine and softness. Some barbers used tiny curling irons to shape moustaches into elegant spirals, a process so meticulous it could lull even the most restless customer into a doze. The tools of the trade were works of art in themselves. Combs carved from tortoiseshell or bone were often engraved with intricate patterns, scrolling vines, heraldic crests, or even miniature portraits. Brushes made from the finest boar or badger bristles were sourced from distant forests, their handles polished to a warm glow. One particularly luxurious item was the beard tamer, a silver comb with a handle shaped like a lion's head, sold exclusively at Harrods in London. Owning such a tool was a status symbol, a sign that you took your whiskers seriously. In Paris, barbers offered gold-dusted pomade, a lavish concoction that left beards shimmering under candlelight, though its exorbitant price limited it to the wealthiest clients. Barbershops were social hubs where men of all classes mingled, in a rare moment of equality. A lawyer might share a chair with a poet, their conversation drifting from the latest parliamentary debate to the best way to prevent beard itch. These discussions were leisurely, punctuated by long pauses and the occasional snore from a customer who drifted off mid-trim. Barbers doubled as storytellers, regaling clients with tales of eccentric customers or legendary beards from history. One famous barber, Monsieur Claude of Paris, claimed to have trimmed Napoleon III's moustache, a story he told with such flair that clients stayed long after their appointments, sipping coffee and listening in the flickering gaslight. The ritual of grooming extended beyond the barbershop. At home, men maintained their beards with an array of products, from rose-scented oils to waxes flavored with cloves or cinnamon. Beard care was a daily meditation, a moment to slow down and savor the quiet. Some men kept beard journals, recording the growth and grooming of their whiskers with the devotion of a monk copying manuscripts. These journals, often leather-bound and scented with cedar, detailed everything from the length of a moustache to the texture of a new pomade. In one such journal, a London merchant described his beard as a garden of my own making, tended with care and pride, a sentiment that captured the era's love affair with facial hair. The art of grooming also inspired innovation. In 1862, a Birmingham craftsman invented a portable beard kit, a velvet-lined case containing a comb, brush, and tiny vials of oil, perfect for gentlemen on the move. The kit was a hit among travellers, who could maintain their whiskers on long train journeys or steamship voyages. Another invention, the beard mirror, was a small folding mirror with a stand, allowing men to admire their whiskers in private. These tools, though practical, were also symbols of the era's obsession with appearance, turning grooming into a ritual of self-care and reflection. Barbershops weren't just for the elite. In working-class neighborhoods, simpler shops offered affordable trims, often in cramped rooms lit by a single lamp. These barbers, though less polished than their Bond Street counterparts, were skilled in their own right, using homemade oils and second-hand tools to create respectable beards. The atmosphere was lively, with customers sharing stories of factory life or market gossip, their voices blending with the clink of scissors and the crackle of a coal fire. Even here, the act of grooming was a moment of respite, a chance to escape the grind of daily life. As we settle into this chapter, imagine yourself in a barbershop chair, the warmth of a towel against your face, the soft snip of scissors in your ears. The world outside fades away, leaving only the gentle rhythm of grooming, a ritual that transforms the ordinary into the sublime. The beard boom was as much about this process as it was about style, a reminder to take things slowly in a fast-moving world. Let's linger here, in the calm of the barbershop, where the air is warm and the world feels far away, before we move on. Part 6. The quirky side of the beard. Boom. The beard boom wasn't all about serious grooming or social status. It had a delightfully quirky side filled with eccentric characters, bizarre trends, and moments of pure absurdity. From beard competitions to bearded pets, the 19th century embraced its whiskers with a sense of fun that bordered on the ridiculous. Let's explore the lighter side of the beard boom, where laughter and relaxation go hand in hand, and the line between creativity and madness was delightfully blurred. One of the most entertaining trends was the rise of beard competitions, which turned facial hair into a spectacle. In 1865, the city of Bath hosted the first Grand Beard and Moustache Championship, a grand affair that drew hundreds of contestants and spectators. Men spent weeks preparing, shaping their beards into fantastical forms, stars, spirals, and even miniature ships complete with tiny sails. The event was held in a flower-filled pavilion, with judges sipping tea and examining whiskers with magnifying glasses. Contestants vied for titles like Most Voluminous Beard, Most Creative, Whiskers, and Best Moustache Curl. One winner, a baker named Henry Potts, crafted a beard shaped like a loaf of bread, earning him a silver comb and a lifetime supply of pomade. Spectators, lounging on velvet cushions, cheered quietly to maintain the event's decorum. Their laughter mingling with the scent of lavender and roasted chestnuts. Beards inspired a wave of novelty products, each more outlandish than the last. In 1862, a London shop began selling beard bibs, small cloth napkins designed to catch crumbs during meals. They were a hit among fastidious gentlemen, though one reviewer in Punch magazine noted that they made dining look like a surgical procedure. Another invention, the beard muff, was a knitted cover to keep whiskers warm in winter. Marketed as essential for the discerning gentleman, it was less successful, as most men preferred to let their beards brave the cold, claiming it built character. In one amusing advertisement, a man was shown dozing by a fire, his beard muff slightly askew, a tiny snowball melting in his whiskers. Some took the beard boom to extremes. In 1867, a Scottish laird named Sir Archibald Campbell became infamous for dyeing his beard bright green to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. The dye, made from a dubious mix of herbs and copper sulfate, stained his face for weeks, but he declared it a triumph of individuality. Crowds gathered to see him parade through Edinburgh, his green whiskers fluttering in the wind. In Paris, a group of artists formed the Beard Brotherhood, a club dedicated to painting portraits of each other's whiskers. Their exhibitions, held in dimly lit galleries, featured canvases of beards in every style, bushy, braided, or curled into spirals. The events were so soothing with soft music and flickering candles that visitors often fell asleep mid-tour, their heads resting on velvet pillows. Even animals got in on the trend. In Vienna, a fashionable tailor named Herr Schmidt began crafting tiny false beards for lapdogs, claiming they gave pets an air of gravitas. The fad was short-lived, as most dogs promptly chewed their beards to shreds, but it made for some hilarious photographs. One image, published in the Illustrated London News, showed a poodle with a miniature mutton chop, its owner beaming proudly. London, a zookeeper briefly experimented with a bearded lion, attaching a false beard to a particularly docile beast for a charity event. The lion, unimpressed, shook it off within minutes, but the stunt drew crowds and raised funds for a local orphanage. The beard boom also inspired literature, much of it delightfully absurd. In 1864, a satirical novel titled The Beard of Destiny became a bestseller, chronicling the adventures of a man whose beard granted him supernatural powers, from predicting the weather to charming wild animals. The book was nonsense, but its gentle humor and leisurely pace made it a favorite bedtime read. Readers reported drifting off with smiles, dreaming of magical whiskers. In Germany, a poet named Heinrich Voss published a collection titled Odes to the Beard, with verses praising the noble mane that graces man's visage. The poems, Read aloud at literary salons were so long-winded that they often lulled listeners into a gentle slumber. The quirky side of the beard boom extended to everyday life. In Manchester, a group of factory workers formed a beard club where members competed to grow the longest whiskers, measuring them weekly with a tailor's tape. The club's meetings, held in a local pub, were filled with laughter and toasts to the glory of the beard. In one memorable incident, a member's beard got caught in a beer tap, prompting a round of cheers and a hasty trim. These light-hearted moments, shared over pints and pipe smoke, added a sense of joy to the daily grind. As we linger in this chapter, picture a crowded fairground where men parade their beards under colourful banners, their laughter mingling with the scent of roasted chestnuts and the soft hum of a band. The beard boom was a time of joy and absurdity, a reminder that even in the stiff Victorian era, people knew how to have fun. Let's rest here, in the glow of the fair, where the world feels light and the air is filled with the warmth of shared laughter, before we continue our story. 7. The legacy of the beard boom. By the 1880s, the beard boom was beginning to fade, as new grooming tools like the safety razor made shaving easier, and a younger generation craved a cleaner look. But the legacy of this hairy era endured, shaping fashion, culture, and even the way men thought about themselves. Let's reflect on the lasting impact of the beard boom as we drift toward the end of our tale, savoring the quiet moments it left behind. The beard boom left an indelible mark on art and literature. Painters like John Singer Sargent captured the majesty of Victorian beards in their portraits, their brushstrokes lingering on every whisker, from the curling moustaches of aristocrats to the bushy beards of poets. These paintings, displayed in galleries from London to Vienna, immortalized the era's obsession with facial hair. Writers, too, embraced the beard as a symbol of freedom and creativity. Charles Dickens, with his neatly trimmed whiskers, wove bearded characters into his novels, from the wise Mr. Pickwick to the eccentric Mr. Micawber. Walt Whitman, across the Atlantic, saw his own beard as a badge of his poetic identity, writing, "My beard is my muse, and it grows with every verse." His poems, read in a slow, soothing cadence, could lull any reader into a state of calm, their rhythm as gentle as a summer breeze. The grooming industry owed a great debt to the beard boom. The products and techniques developed in the 19th century, oils, combs, pomades, and brushes, laid the foundation for modern barbering. Barbershops remained social hubs where men could escape the pressures of daily life and indulge in a moment of tranquility. The ritual of a barber's chair, with its warm towels and gentle snips, carried echoes of the Victorian era, a time when grooming was as much about relaxation as appearance. In 1885, a London barber named William Truefit opened a shop that still operates today, its shelves stocked with the same lavender-scented oils used a century earlier. These products, once the height of fashion, became timeless, a testament to the beard boom's enduring influence. The beard boom also reshaped notions of masculinity and individuality. In an age of rigid social norms, growing a beard was an act of rebellion, a way to assert one's unique identity in a world of uniformity. It paved the way for later fashion revolutions, from the long hair of the 1960s to the hipster beards of the 20s and 10s. Each time a man puts down his razor, he's channeling a bit of that 19th century spirit, whether he knows it or not. The beard became a symbol of self-expression, a way to stand out in a crowd, whether in a Victorian ballroom or a modern coffee shop. Beards never fully disappeared after the 1880s. They waxed and waned with the times, reappearing in moments of cultural upheaval or nostalgia. In the early 20th century, explorers like Ernest Shackleton sported beards during their Arctic expeditions, their whiskers a nod to the rugged heroes of the Crimean War. In the 1970s, beards returned as symbols of counterculture, worn by musicians and activists who rejected mainstream norms. Today, beards are a staple of modern style, from the artisanal barbershops of Brooklyn to the tech boardrooms of Silicon Valley, where executives sport carefully trimmed whiskers as a nod to both tradition and trend. The beard boom also taught a deeper lesson: the value of slowing down. In a world that moves faster every day, the act of grooming a beard, combing, oiling, trimming reminds us to take our time, to savor the quiet moments. Victorians understood this as they sat in their barbershops, eyes half closed, letting the world fade away. The ritual was a form of meditation, a chance to pause and reflect in an era of relentless progress. In one poignant diary entry, a London's Clark wrote, "My beard is my sanctuary, a place where time stands still and the world is kind." His words capture the essence of the beard boom, a celebration of patience in a hurried age. The legacy of the beard boom extended to unexpected places. In education, bearded professors became icons of wisdom, their whiskers lending gravitas to their lectures. In politics, bearded leaders like Otto von Bismarck, the German chancellor, used their facial hair to project strength and authority. Even in religion, beards played a role, with clergy in some denominations growing whiskers to emulate biblical figures. These threads, woven into the fabric of the 19th century, continued to influence culture long after the razors returned. As we close this chapter, imagine a quiet Victorian street at dusk, the glow of gaslights reflecting off polished windows. A man walks home, his beard neatly trimmed, his steps slow and unhurried. The beard boom may have ended, but its spirit lives on, in every whisker and every moment of calm, a reminder that beauty lies in the details. Let's rest here, in the soft light of evening, where the world feels gentle and the air is filled with the promise of rest, before we continue our story. Part 8. The beard boom in literature and media. The beard boom wasn't just a fashion trend, it was a cultural phenomenon that permeated the arts, particularly literature and the emerging media of the 19th century. From novels to newspapers, poems to pamphlets, beards became a symbol of character, creativity, and even comedy, capturing the imagination of writers and readers alike. Let's wander through the pages of Victorian books and the inky columns of periodicals, where whiskers were celebrated, mocked, and immortalized in stories that lulled readers into a cozy, contemplative state. Literature embraced the beard as a shorthand for personality. In Charles Dickens's novels, bearded characters often embodied wisdom or eccentricity. In the Pickwick Papers, Samuel Pickwick's modest whiskers suggested a kindly, scholarly nature, while in Our Mutual Friend, the villainous Rogue Riderhood's scruffy beard hinted at his dubious morals. Dickens himself, with his neatly trimmed beard, was a walking advertisement for the trend, his public readings drawing crowds who admired both his prose and his whiskers. Across the Atlantic, Walt Whitman's poetry elevated the beard to a near mythical status. In Leaves of Grass he wrote, "The beard, full and flowing, is the banner of the soul," a line that resonated with readers seeking authenticity in an industrial age. Whitman's verses, read aloud in soft, rhythmic tones, were perfect for bedtime, their cadence soothing listeners into a gentle slumber. Satirical literature had a field day with the beard boom. In 1864, The Beard of Destiny, a satirical novel by an anonymous author, became a bestseller in London. The story followed a young clerk whose magical beard granted him powers like weather prediction and the ability to charm creditors. The book's absurd humor and leisurely pace made it a favorite for late-night reading, with readers reporting dreams of enchanted whiskers. In Germany, Heinrich Voss's Odes to the Beard was a poetic oddity. Its 50 stanzas praising every aspect of facial hair, from the silken strands of youth to the snowy whiskers of age. Voss's readings held in candlelit salons were so long-winded that they often sent audiences drifting off, their heads resting on velvet cushions. Newspapers and magazines played a crucial role in spreading the beard boom. Punch, the British humour magazine, published countless cartoons poking fun at the trend. One famous illustration showed a bearded man whose whiskers were so long they tangled in a chandelier, captioned, "A hairy situation." These cartoons, printed on crisp newsprint, were passed around in coffee houses where men chuckled over their tea. More serious publications, like the Illustrated London News, featured articles on beard care, complete with engravings of dandies, grooming their whiskers by gaslight. In 1857, the magazine ran a feature on the beard in history, tracing facial hair from ancient Egypt to the present, a lengthy piece that readers found oddly soothing, its dense prose perfect for drifting off. The beard boom also inspired a wave of pamphlets and guidebooks, many of which became bedside staples. Thomas Gillette's The Art of the Beard was a cultural touchstone, offering detailed instructions for styles like the Imperial Cascade and Philosopher's Tuft. The pamphlet, bound in soft leather, was a common gift for young men, its pages thumbed through by candlelight. In France, a similar guide, L'Art de la Barbe, by Monsieur Dupont, included recipes for homemade beard oils, blending lavender, rosemary, and even crushed violets. These guides, with their meticulous descriptions, were as much about relaxation as grooming, inviting readers to linger over each step. Theatre, too, embraced the beard boom. In London's West End, plays like The Bearded Baron, 1863, drew crowds, with their comedic take on whisker obsession. The titular Baron, played by a popular actor with a prosthetic beard, spent half the play untangling his whiskers from various props, to the delight of audiences. These performances, held in gaslit theatres, were a perfect escape, with spectators sinking into plush seats and losing themselves in the absurdity. In smaller venues, travelling troupes performed beard skits, short comedies where actors donned exaggerated whiskers to play philosophers or pirates, their antics lulling audiences into laughter and repose. Photography, an emerging art form, captured the beard boom in vivid detail. Daguerreotypes and tintypes showed men posing proudly with their whiskers, often in soft-focus studios lit by skylights. Photographers like Julia Margaret Cameron experimented with beard portraits, using long exposures to capture the texture of each strand. These images, framed in velvet, were cherished keepsakes, often displayed on bedside tables. In one famous photograph, a bearded gentleman was captured dozing in a chair, his whiskers spilling over his collar, a tiny comb tucked into the curls, a perfect encapsulation of the era's blend of humour and tranquility. The media's fascination, with beards extended to advertising, grooming product ads filled newspapers, with brands like Dr. Whisker's Beard Balm promising a mane worthy of a king. These ads, often illustrated with sleepy-eyed gentlemen, were designed to evoke a sense of calm, inviting readers to imagine themselves in a barbershop chair. In one memorable campaign, a London soap company claimed its lavender lather could soothe the soul through the whiskers, a claim that resonated with readers seeking respite from the hustle of city life. As we linger in this chapter, picture a cozy Victorian parlour, its walls adorned with framed portraits, its air filled with the scent of ink and paper. A man sits by a fire, a copy of Punch in hand, chuckling at a beard cartoon as his eyes grow heavy. The beard boom was a muse for writers, artists and dreamers, its stories a soothing escape from the world. Let's rest here, in the glow of the parlour, where the pages turn slowly and the air is filled with the soft crackle of a fire, before we move on. Part 9. The Beard Boom and Gender Dynamics. The beard boom wasn't just a male phenomenon, it reshaped gender dynamics, influencing how men and women interacted in the Victorian era. Facial hair became a canvas for masculinity, a topic of fascination for women, and a point of contention in the complex dance of courtship, fashion, and social norms. Let's explore how beards redefined relationships, sparked debates, and added a touch of humor to the gendered world of the 19th century, all while inviting us to relax in its cozy absurdity. For men, beards were a powerful symbol of masculinity, a way to assert strength and individuality in an era of rigid expectations. The Victorian ideal of manhood was multifaceted. Gentlemen were expected to be refined yet robust, polite yet commanding. A beard bridged these contradictions, combining the ruggedness of an explorer with the polish of a dandy. In gentlemen's clubs, men boasted about their whiskers, comparing them to the manes of lions or the oaks of an ancient forest. These conversations, held over glasses of port, were as much about bonding as bravado, with men sinking into armchairs, their voices soft and unhurried. Women's reactions to the beard boom were varied and vocal. In 1859, the Ladies' Companion published its famous "The Beard, Friend or Foe" debate, which captured the spectrum of opinions. Some women adored beards, finding them a mark of virility and charm. At balls, young ladies whispered about bearded suitors, their whiskers gleaming under chandeliers like badges of honor. A well-groomed beard, scented with rosewater or sandalwood, could make a man irresistible, his presence commanding attention on the dance floor. In one diary entry, a London debutante described a bearded officer as a knight in whiskers, his face a tapestry of courage and grace, her words dripping with romantic fervour. Others were less enchanted. Beards, particularly unkempt ones, were criticised for being scratchy during dances or unhygienic at dinner parties. A letter to Godey's Lady's Book in 1860 complained of a suitor whose beard harboured half his supper, prompting laughter and sympathy from readers. These critiques often carried a playful tone, with women using humour to navigate the trend. In Paris, a group of society ladies formed the Smooth Chin Society, a tongue-in-cheek club that advocated for clean-shaven men. Their meetings, held in elegant salons, were filled with laughter and tea, though many members secretly admired a well-trimmed beard. Beards also influenced courtship rituals. A man's whiskers were often seen as a reflection of his character. Neatly groomed beards suggested discipline, while wild ones hinted at a free spirit. In 1861, a matchmaking guide titled "The Art of Wooing" advised men to let your beard speak of your virtues, recommending daily grooming to impress potential brides. Some women, however, used beards as a test of a suitor's patience, asking them to grow or trim their whiskers as a sign of devotion. In one famous anecdote, a Manchester heiress refused to marry her suitor until he grew a beard worthy of a poet, a task that took him 6 months and countless bottles of violet oil. The beard boom also sparked debates about femininity. While women didn't grow beards, they were drawn into the trend through fashion and accessories. In London, milliners sold beard-inspired hats, adorned with ribbons shaped like moustaches, a playful nod to the craze. In Paris, seamstresses created whisker lace, a delicate fabric patterned with curling designs, worn by women who wanted to complement their husbands' beards. These trends, though whimsical, reflected the era's fascination with facial hair, blurring the lines between male and female fashion. The beard boom also had a darker side as it reinforced gender stereotypes. Some men used their whiskers to assert dominance, arguing that facial hair was a natural sign of male superiority. In 1863, a London preacher gave a sermon claiming that God gave man a beard to distinguish him from woman, a statement that drew applause from some and eye rolls from others. Women, in turn, used humor to push back. A satirical poem in the ladies' newspaper described a bearded man as a bear in a frock coat, poking fun at the trend's excesses. These exchanges, playful yet pointed, added a layer of complexity to the era's gender dynamics. Beards also played a role in family life. In middle-class households, fathers with impressive whiskers were often seen as pillars of authority, their beards lending gravitas to their role. Children were fascinated by their father's whiskers, sometimes sneaking combs into their beards during bedtime stories. In one charming diary entry, a London girl described braiding her father's beard with ribbons, a nightly ritual that ended with both falling asleep by the fire. These moments, filled with warmth and laughter, made beards a part of family lore, a symbol of connection and comfort. As we settle into this chapter, imagine a candlelit ballroom where men with gleaming beards waltz with women in flowing gowns, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a violin. The beard boom reshaped how men and women saw each other, adding a touch of humor and humanity to the rigid rules of Victorian society. Let's rest here in the glow of the ballroom, where the air is filled with the scent of perfume and the promise of connection, before we continue. Part 10. The Decline and Revival of the Beard. Boom, the beard boom, for all its glory, was not eternal. By the late 1880s, the trend began to wane, as new technologies, shifting fashions, and changing social attitudes brought the razor back into favor. Yet, like a well-groomed whisker, the beard never truly disappeared. It retreated only to return, in new forms, leaving a legacy that continues to resonate. Let's explore the decline of the beard boom, its brief revivals, and the timeless lessons it left behind as we drift toward the end of our soothing tale. The decline began with the invention of the safety razor in the 1880s, a game-changer that made shaving easier, cheaper, and less painful. Patented by the American king Camp Gillette, no relation to our earlier barber, the safety razor replaced the cumbersome straight razors of the past, allowing men to shave at home without a barber's help. Advertisements for Gillette's razors, featuring clean-shaven men in crisp suits, promised a modern look for a modern age. The message resonated with a new generation, eager to distance themselves from the heavy whiskers of their fathers. Barbershops, once bustling with beard enthusiasts, began offering clean-shave specials, their chairs filled with men seeking a fresh start. Fashion also played a role in the beard's decline. By the 1890s, the aesthetic movement, led by figures like Oscar Wilde, favored a more refined, almost androgynous look. Clean-shaven faces, paired with tailored suits and artistic cravats, became the hallmark of the modern gentleman. Magazines like The Strand ran articles praising the smooth chin as a symbol of progress, while cartoons mocked old-fashioned beards as relics of a bygone era. In one memorable illustration, a bearded man was shown struggling to eat soup, his whiskers dripping comically, while a clean-shaven rival dined with ease. Social attitudes shifted as well. The rise of corporate culture in the late 19th century demanded conformity, and a clean-shaven face became a sign of professionalism. Banks, railways, and government offices issued dress codes discouraging beards, arguing they were untidy or unhygienic. In 1890, a London bank fired a clerk for refusing to shave his beard, sparking a minor scandal that filled newspaper columns. The clerk, a poet named Henry Grayson, responded with a pamphlet titled The Tyranny of the Razor, which sold modestly, but became a cult favorite among beard enthusiasts. Despite its decline, the beard boom left a lasting imprint. In rural areas where traditions lingered, farmers and craftsmen continued to grow beards, their whiskers a nod to the past. In artistic circles, beards remained a badge of creativity, worn by painters and writers who rejected mainstream norms. The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, a group of British artists, sported lush beards well into the 1890s, their whiskers a symbol of their bohemian ideals. These holdouts kept the spirit of the beard boom alive, their faces a quiet rebellion against the razor's rise. The beard saw revivals in later decades, each tied to moments of cultural shift. In the early 20th century, explorers like Ernest Shackleton and Roald Amundsen grew beards during their Arctic and Antarctic expeditions, their whiskers echoing the rugged heroes of the Crimean War. These images, published in newspapers, sparked a brief explorer beard trend among city dwellers who admired the grit of polar adventurers. In the 1920s, beards reappeared among avant-garde artists in Paris, who saw them as a rejection of post-war conformity. By the 1970s, the counterculture movement brought beards back in force, with musicians like Bob Dylan and activists sporting whiskers as symbols of freedom. The beard's modern revival began in the 2010s, driven by the hipster movement and a renewed interest in artisanal grooming. Barbershops, inspired by their Victorian predecessors, sprang up in cities like Brooklyn and London, offering oils, waxes, and combs reminiscent of the 19th century. These shops, with their exposed brick walls and vintage mirrors, became modern sanctuaries where men could relax under the gentle snip of scissors. Social media amplified the trend with hashtags like beardlife and Dias Whisker Pride, echoing the enthusiasm of Victorian beard clubs. Today, beards are a staple of style, worn by everyone from tech CEOs to baristas, each whisker a nod to the great beard boom. The beard boom's greatest legacy is its celebration of patience. In a world that demands speed, the act of growing and grooming a beard is a reminder to slow down, to savor the quiet moments. Victorians understood this as they sat in their barbershops, the scent of lavender filling the air, their minds drifting to distant thoughts. The ritual of grooming, with its soft brushes and warm towels, was a form of meditation, a chance to find peace in a chaotic world. This lesson, timeless and universal, continues to resonate, inviting us to pause and find beauty in the everyday. As we close this final chapter, imagine a quiet Victorian street at dusk, the glow of gaslights casting shadows on cobblestones. A man walks home, his beard neatly trimmed or perhaps freshly shaved, his steps slow and deliberate. The beard boom may have faded, but its spirit endures in every whisker, every moment of calm, and every story that lulls us into rest. Let's rest here, in the soft light of evening, where the world feels gentle and the air is filled with the promise of dreams as our story comes to an end. Thank you for joining me on this whiskery journey through the 19th century. If you enjoyed drifting through the world of Victorian beards, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps us share these cozy stories with more sleepy history lovers like you. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to never miss a tale, whether it's about forgotten fashions or quirky historical quirks. In the comments, share your thoughts. Would you have grown a beard in the 1800s, or are you team clean-shaven? And if you know a friend who'd love to relax with a bit of history, share this video with them. For more soothing stories, check out our playlist of bedtime tales linked below. Now close your eyes, let the world fade away, and drift off to the gentle rhythm of the past. Good night.